Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming along tonight for what I'm sure is going to be a very enlightening and entertaining presentation by Richard Mulvaney on cultural industries and the role of museums in Tasmania. My name is Dr. Robert Clark, and I'm a senior lecturer in English. I teach here on the Newnham campus in Launceston, and I'm also currently the Head of Discipline for English in the School of Humanities in the College of Arts, Law and Education. It's my very great privilege to welcome you all to tonight's presentation and talk. This talk is part of a series of lectures that we are hosting over the next 9 or so weeks. It's part of a series that we've called the Humanities and Social Sciences Taster Unit, and the idea is to put on a selection of lectures and presentations, open it to members of the public to come along, but most of the lectures are drawn from the schedule of lectures and presentations that are on our undergraduate course list. So we have over the next 9 weeks or so, 7 lectures, which people will be presenting material that are drawn from the sort of topics that they teach in their undergraduate courses. And I thought I'd just introduce those to you now as part of welcome you to the series. This is the second iteration of the series. We presented this series in the first half of this year, and we have, if you're interested, I can give you the link to the webpage where you can go and see the recordings of the lectures. But we have next week Dr. Malcolm Bywaters talking on house and home. We have Karen Hall talking on art in public on 23rd of August. On the 13th of September, Professor Dick Boltsey from philosophy is talking about post-traumatic stress and the just war. We have the sociologist Dr. Kim McLeod talking about what creates well-being on the 20th of September. And we have from architecture Dr. Stuart King talking about history and practice, heritage conservation and contemporary Australian architecture. And then Dr. Sonia Stanford from social work will be talking about suffering risks rather than experiencing care and mental health policy and practice on the 4th of October. Ostensibly, this is a lecture series run by academics in the humanities and social sciences, but for this particular iteration of the series, we're sort of branching out. We're including topics from, as you've seen, social work, art history, art theory, architecture, and social work and sociology. And tonight, we're very privileged to have Richard Mulvaney to introduce our series and to kick it off with his talk on the role of museums and cultural tourism in Tasmania. It's my privilege now to introduce Richard to you, although I'm sure many of you are already familiar with Richard and his role here in Launceston at the Queen Victoria Museum and Art Gallery. Richard has worked in the museum sector for 35 years, including at the Australian War Memorial, the Australian Institute of Aboriginal Studies in Canberra, and Sovereign Hill, Ballarat. His background is in archaeology, history and cultural heritage. Late in 1988, he accepted the position of founding director of the Bradman Museum in Bowral, New South Wales, where he developed a special purpose-built museum in honour of Australian cricketing legend Sir Donald Bradman. In 2007, Richard was appointed General Manager of Business and Administration with Museums and Galleries New South Wales, and from 2008-2010 he held the role of Chief Executive Officer with the New South Wales Rail Transport Museum. Richard was instrumental in developing a new $30 million rail heritage centre at Thirlmere in the New South Wales Southern Highlands. He served on various museum and art gallery committees, including as President for Museums Australia, New South Wales, President of Museums Australia, Tasmania, and Vice President Museums Australia, National. He recently stepped down from the Tasmanian Arts Advisory Board, and he's a member of the Port Arthur Historic Site Conservation Committee. His interests include tourism, and he served on several tourism boards, including as chairman of the Illawarra Tourism Zone and Tourism Southern Highlands Board. Richard is currently director of the Queen Victoria Museum and Art Gallery here in Launceston. It's Australia's largest regional museum, supported by the City of Launceston and the Tasmanian Government. And his directorate also includes the Princess Theatre and the Earls Arts Centre. He's one of the Council's representatives on the Theatre North Board, and as you can be well aware, there's probably no one better qualified in this state to talk about the role of museums and cultural heritage in Tasmania than Richard Mulvaney, and I'd like you to welcome him now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob, for all that. It sounds like I've been everywhere, just done about everything. Look, it is my pleasure to be here today. In fact, it's quite surprising I'm here today because I thought I was giving this talk tomorrow. It wasn't until yesterday afternoon they actually looked at my calendar to see that it was today. So I don't know whether you're lucky or unlucky that I'm here at 7 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon when I thought it was going to be Thursday. I also am very conscious that some of you will have either hastily eaten a meal, so feeling rather sort of digested, or you're all just going to sit here and wait happily that I finish early so that you all go home for dinner. But I applaud all of you that have come out tonight to hear this talk, and I do commend UTAS for this initiative to share a lot of the work and the research that they do with the general public is extremely commendable. And I'm certainly in very celebrated company when I look at the list of speakers that are in this series alone. So it's a pleasure to speak today. I don't normally have a prepared speech. It's a frightening thought for some people who know me well. Look at this. Look at that. It's almost volumic. Normally I speak off the cuff, which my wife hates. But I normally prefer it that way. But when I'm going to give a public talk like this, I certainly felt that I needed to sound a little bit learned than I normally do. So bear with me if it sounds like I'm reading a speech. I try not to do that. But there are a lot of important things I think I'll raise today that I think they're important. And so we'll be able to tease some of that out. And certainly, obviously, at the end, I will leave some time for some questions. I titled this lecture series, The Role of Museums in Cultural Tourism in Tasmania, because obviously when you look at my background, I do range widely across cultural tourism and the culture, but I also feel that there's been a sort of disengagement between the cultural providers as such and the tourism industry that we know as the traditional type of industry. And I'm certainly one, and there are many more like me, that are trying to join those two mediums together because they are a natural fit. Tourism opportunities in Tasmania have been traditionally focused on the island's outstanding natural wilderness, yet it is a state that also has a significant arts and culture focus. Tasmania's long tradition of cultural and built heritage is entwined as it should be with the arts. Our museums are playing an increasing role in developing our cultural identity and celebrating our diverse and creative peoples. Mona has led the way and created a paradigm shift in what we see, in how we see our cultural institutions and their place in contemporary society. Mona burst on the cultural map in 2011 and within a year became Tasmania's most visited attraction. Much to my annoyance, I always thought it should have been QVMAG. At about the same time, World Heritage status was awarded to several convict sites across the island, including Port Arthur. In 2011, QVMAG, we reopened our Wellington Street site as a dedicated art gallery after a $9 million upgrade. In 2013, TMAG reopened following a $30 million upgrade. I would argue that this investment and more to follow in the arts and culture, including our museums, has shifted tourism dependency from wilderness and has helped create a more sustainable Tasmania. Just move on with my slides. Despite this clear investment at this time, the City of Launceston, received a strategic tourism plan, and it's interesting to note we have some people from tourism here. We have the author of the comment I'm about to make as well, and I think half the room could probably have delivered this talk today on cultural tourism. But in that A. Stafford and Associates in 2012, the report failed to recognise the importance of cultural tourism despite the advent of places like Mona. The absence of QVMAG and the other cultural organisations in Launceston in this report intrigued social observer Ray Norman, who's here tonight, who published a response on his blog in 2012. I'll just read a section of it that makes, I think, salient reading. A lot of it does, but I didn't want to quote the entire talk. He encapsulates cultural tourism as, at its best, cultural tourism gives the visitor access to information, experience and activities that can help them feel engaged with a place, its people and their heritage. In essence, the tourist seeks to feel at home, albeit elsewhere, and likewise seeks the opportunity to compare and contrast home with elsewhere. Creating relationships of various kinds between the visitor and the host community is an important feature of cultural tourism, and especially so in a marketing context, which is what he was referring to. Furthermore, concepts of sustainability, authenticity, integrity and education are essential to cultural tourism as they are to ecotourism. Tasmania has a rich and vibrant cultural heritage and history. For over 40,000 years, the Aboriginal community developed a vibrant cultural life that was intrinsically linked with cultural significant places across the landscape. With the arrival of Europeans, Hobart was established in late 1805, followed by Launceston in 1806, making them the second and third oldest cities in Australia respectively. With cities comes in cultural innovation, and in Hobart we see the establishment of the Botanic Gardens in 1818. I better keep moving along the slide so you get some essence there. That's the Botanic Gardens, not so sure 1818 before photography, but an early shot nevertheless. The Theatre Royal in 1837, I think it's Australia's oldest theatre, and the Royal Society in 1843, which developed a museum that became the Tasmanian Museum and Art Gallery in 1885. That's the Theatre Royal, and that's the Tasmanian Museum and Art Gallery. This was mirrored in Launceston with the Mechanics Institute in 1842, which also developed their own museum that became the Queen Victoria Museum and Art Gallery in 1891. The mining boom of the 1880s, particularly in the north, provided dramatic growth, which saw the development of grand urban designs and many more places of public recreation and artistic endeavour. A classic standout in cultural tourism at this time for me was the Tasmanian International Exhibition in the purpose-built Albert Hall in Launceston, just down the road from here tonight. With 1,372 exhibitors and 6,822 exhibits, it attracted 262,059 people through the turnstiles. So it's an accurate number. They had turnstiles in a 4-month period in the summer of 1891-92. At the time, Launceston's population was only 17,208. It's an astonishing result when you think that all who journeyed to Tasmania had to do so by boat. Sure, there must have been multiple visits by locals, but one can only imagine the activity that must have been about the town during those 4 months of the Tasmanian International Exhibition. Just goes to show how, I suppose, get up and go Launceston had in those heady days after the mining boom. The 19th century has undoubtedly left a built heritage and cultural tradition that remains uniquely Tasmanian. Both Hobart and Launceston remain some of the most intact 19th century city landscapes in Australia. Then there is Port Arthur, neglected for many years, which became an early example of Australia's renewed interest in their past in the 1960s and 70s. In many ways, it paved the way for cultural tourism in Australia, with several mainland cultural sites aspiring to emulate its success with mixed results. More recently, an arts and craft movement and a burgeoning food and wine industry have caught the attention of tourists and locals alike, as is evident every week at Salamanca Place and other markets across the state, including our own Harvest Launceston. And I'd like to say congratulations to Harvest for being named the most outstanding farmers market by ABC Delicious magazine on Monday night, so incredible effort. Together with all this, there is a series of popular regular events such as 10 Days on the Island, Festivali, Junction Arts Festival, Mona Foma and Dark Mofo, to name a few. It all adds and provides seasonal reasons for people to visit Tasmania, when once the only time you would come was January. The response to Mona and its associated events has been overwhelming. No one previously seriously considered coming to Tasmania in winter. Why would you? Yet thanks to Dark Mofo, it's becoming a season of choice. It has set a new benchmark for cultural engagement and has been the catalyst for many new visitors to come to Tasmania. Only recently, while waiting for a meeting in Hobart during the last festival, I watched a crowd of dedicated mofoers disembark their cruise ship in their hundreds, heading off like lemmings to the Mona Roma jetty to be transported to Mona. They were all from Sydney, because I asked, mostly a younger demographic who had booked a Dark Mofo purpose cruise, and they all seemed to be having a great time despite the cold and the early hour. I imagine how they would all be by the end of the day, but I'm sure they will have had a lot of fun, and I regretted that I couldn't join them. With a museum background, I want to highlight the role our 4 major museums in Tasmania and that are contributing significantly to how Tasmania is viewed outside of the state and the impact they are having on the people who live in it. After all, tourism is not just about interstate visitors, and our growing arts and culture, led by our museums and associated events, is providing solid reasons why we choose to continue to live here. The Tasmanian Museum and Art Gallery. It's a wonderful edifice you can see here. Tasmania, the QVMAG, as I'll call it, has been housed on its current site at the centre of Hobart's waterfront since 1863. As noted previously, its collections go back even further to the formation of the Royal Society of Tasmania in 1843, which is Australia's oldest scientific society. Tasmania likes to have the oldest of everything. Today, QVMAG holds a diverse state collection that includes art, history and science, including a herbarium. It attracts about 350,000 visitors a year, with a range of permanent touring exhibitions, public programs and all the ancillary services that you would expect in a major capital city museum. It is an important part of the interpretation of the Hobart waterfront and of Tasmania more generally. In itself, it is part of the city's cultural landscape. Recognising its significance, the state government committed to a $30 million redevelopment that opened in 2013 and included a new entrance with the Queen's Warehouse becoming a centralised visitor hub, including a shop, cafe, education area and members lounge. The Bond store, that have been closed for many years, have become new gallery spaces, and there is now a better link between the early colonial buildings and the more recent additions with a range of new exhibitions. It has changed the focus of QVMAG and provided a better orientation to the harbour front. It was part of a $200 million spend, which has been on hold while QVMAG worked on developing its strategic plan 2016-2021 and submitted the Tasmanian Museum and Art Gallery Bill 2016, now before the Tasmanian Parliament. I think the last bill was 1950, so it was certainly in need of a refresher. With the economic benefit of the cultural offering clearly demonstrated over recent years at QVMAG, it is hoped that the initial project will be reconsidered, albeit I'm sure slightly modified from the $200 million spend they had hoped. You'd think I saved the best to last, but I'll move into the Queen Victoria Museum and Art Gallery. These are all QVMAG, wonderful shots of their additions and changes they made to the building. Obviously the education program and children's program is extremely important. We then moved to the Queen Victoria Museum and Art Gallery, which, as Rob mentioned, is Australia's largest regional museum, located at two major sites: the original 1891 building at Royal Park and the former railway workshop at Inveresk. Like TMAG, the QVMAG collection predates the opening of the museum with the formation of the Launceston Mechanics Institute in 1842. This slide is the wonderful building that was the Launceston Mechanics Institute that's on St John Street, which was sadly demolished in the 1970s, I think. It was that late in the piece. It looks absolutely magnificent building, and when you think it sits on the corner of Town Hall, the Post Office and the state government buildings, to have had the Mechanics Institute on that corner would have just been absolutely magnificent. It made way for that wonderful modern architectural edifice, the Link Library that we all love so dearly. But who knows? Hindsight's a fine thing, and I think Launceston is a fairly lucky place that thankfully it was a city that time forgot for a while there, and the developers didn't move in like they certainly were able to do into Hobart and other cities. But that was the Mechanics Institute. And this, of course, is the wonderful Queen Victoria Museum and Art Gallery when it opened in 1891. I do tell a lovely story of that building, in that the City of Launceston got on and got a £5,000 contribution from the state government to build the building. The foundation stone was laid in 1887, hence our name, the Jubilee of Queen Victoria. They started construction in 1890. They had actually finished the building within a year, but the Launceston City Council, who remains as cluey today then as they are today, refused to open the building until the state government gave a written assurance it would pay for the ongoing operating costs of a museum, which is extraordinary sort of foresight for Launceston Council in its day. But thankfully, to an 1895 Act of Parliament, our funding from the state government is enshrined, but not necessarily a given, as many of the audience would know when it comes to government funding. And like TMAG, the QVMAG collection is just as diverse and includes fine art, history and science, including a planetarium. It attracts about 45,000 visitors a year and provides a museum focus for northern Tasmania. It is unique in that it is the only museum in regional Australia that is of the size and dimension of its capital city counterpart, reflecting the historical settlement of the state at two ends of the geography. Inveresk houses science and history in what is one of the most intact reused industrial sites in Australia, which was part of a $30 million redevelopment when the workshops closed down in the 1990s. It is part of a broader arts sports complex that includes UTAS Visual Arts, Performing Arts and the Architecture and Design Schools, the Tramshed Function Space and the University of Tasmania Stadium, and much more to come, it seems. In September 2011, QVMAG opened its new dedicated art gallery after a $9 million upgrade of the original 1891 building. Again, it includes all the elements of a major city art gallery with a significant collection that has special emphasis on Tasmanian colonial art. Both TMAG and QVMAG have undergone major upgrades to provide better cultural facilities and represent a significant investment in the arts and culture. When you consider that both museums have attracted annually more people than the population of each host city, it is an indication of the important role they both play in telling our own stories. That is way above the visitor rates per population in any other state. These are images of our new First Tasmanians gallery, and that's obviously in Inveresk. Port Arthur Historic Sites. Port Arthur on the Tasman Peninsula is the best preserved convict site in Australia and has one of the country's most visited cultural heritage attractions. In 2010 it was included, as I said earlier, in the list of 11 Australian convict sites on the World Heritage Register. It is a significant and complex cultural landscape with ongoing layers of history covering it as a penal facility between 1830 to 1877, a regional settlement, a state national park, and then a tourist site. It is a place that never really closed down. The fascination into its penal past, especially during the convict period, meant that it has always had an ongoing interest. Coupled with the preservation of so many buildings, meant it strongly reflected a past at a time when in the latter part of the 20th century Australians were becoming more interested in their own history. It has been an integral part of Tasmania's museum offering for many years. Indeed, for a time it was the most recognisable aspect of Tasmania for many Australians. The Scenic Preservation Board took over parts of Port Arthur in 1915, making it pretty early in terms of managing a cultural site. From 1971 it was managed by National Parks and Wildlife, and then since 1987 it has been managed by the Port Arthur Historic Site Management Authority, which is a bit of a mouthful. It has traded as a cultural heritage site, and over that time the preservation and interpretation of it has been improved, with a strong sense of heritage authenticity and visitor experience. The separate prison conservation project completed in 2010 has won both heritage and interpretation awards. And in 2015, Port Arthur won the nation's most prestigious tourism award as the best tourism attraction in the country. With a strong sense of creating a visitor experience rather than passive viewing, they have introduced house talks, summer play programs, educational activities such as brickmaking, and introduced, well, we could do with more brickmaking here in Tasmania. I don't think they make them anywhere else but in Port Arthur at the moment, in Tasmania, and introduced the very popular paranormal ghost tours. It currently attracts about 350,000 visitors a year. Jane Harrington, who's Director of Conservation Infrastructure, noted, "The strongest factor in our success is the strong linkage between conservation priorities and tourism and the retention of an authentic experience." Let's quickly rip through a few slides of Port Arthur. That's their new Visitor Interpretation Centre, which will open in December. Then, of course, the jewel in the Derwent, the Museum of Old and New Art, Mona. Mona rejigged, opened in January 2011 and is the largest privately funded museum in Australia. Located at Marilla Winery, and what a fabulous place to have any cultural institution in the middle of a winery, the original museum was set up in 2001 by David Walsh before closing in 2007 for what was then said at the time a $75 million plus transformation. Estimates are that he spent well in excess of $200 million on Mona, and I think it just keeps going when you look at what's gone into that site since. What was created was a 3-level underground multimedia museum of installations, artworks and antiquities. It opened with an exhibition of over 400 artworks from David Walsh's private collection. It included many notable works not displayed publicly in Australia that Walsh had acquired in the lead up to the opening. Since then, there have been a succession of exhibitions, including the current Museum of Everything, which is a touring exhibition which opened in London in 2009. The site includes a winery, brewery, restaurant and hotel, and I think if QVMAG had all those things, you'd never see me at my office desk. In its first year, the site attracted over 400,000 visitors, far outstripping every other long-term tourist attraction in the state. In fact, it opened only 3 weeks after I moved to Launceston, and I got an invitation, and when it came I said to my PA at the time, "What's Mona?" or "Who's ever heard of Mona? I don't think I'll go to this exhibition opening." She thought I was mad, that half of Tasmania would have killed for that invitation, and I owed it to her, if nobody else, that I better go to that exhibition opening. I'm glad I took her advice. I'm sure there's a few here that were there that first opening. I had to pinch myself because I thought I'd come to something that was more akin to the 1950s of mainland Australia, and there was this incredible building and facility. In fact, I thought I was transported back even further to something like a Roman orgy. It was an incredible opening, and there should be more like them. Sadly, QVMAG, who's always very conscious of the public purse, is far more restrictive in the sort of functions and festivities that we can put on for the masses, but Mona certainly does it in style, and I'm eternally grateful. If you get an invitation, do go. I strongly recommend. They're a good night out. And don't drive home. It is a world-class collection in a world-class building that has captured the imagination of a world audience. Visitor trends in the few years have been interesting in that 60% of their visitors are interstate and international, while 40% are Tasmanian. That so many Tasmanians have visited is a testament to the quality of the product and some very good marketing. Delia Nichols, the museum research curator, said to me, Mona is a megaphone to the other attractions of Hobart. I would argue that it's much more than that, and that is bringing people to Tasmania that have never thought of coming before, especially from overseas. A few quick snapshots of Mona and their site and their activities and venues. I don't need to sell Mona to any of you. I'm sure you've all been there. It's an incredible facility, and it's just extraordinary. I thought I'd briefly touch on recent trends in the 4 museums that I've just listed. QVMAG. In 2015-16, QVMAG's total visitation grew 6% with 383,026 visitors. They haven't yet published the 16-17 figures, but they expect a similar trend. 41% of visitors were Tasmanians. Interstate visits were 42% of the total, with the largest growth from New South Wales visitors. And I think this is something that a lot of museums and galleries certainly don't look at. Where is their market, where are they coming from and why? And how should we be spending our limited marketing dollars to maximise the return? International visitation was up from 2% to 17% of total visitors, thanks to the increase in cruise ships into Hobart. And how do I wish cruise ships could cruise straight up the Tamar like they used to in the 1800s. And what a free kick for QVMAG, because the berth is almost opposite the museum. And these ships come in and they've got 3,000 or 4,000 people minimum. What else are they going to do? What a fabulous location. I understand that Chris Griffin from the Northern Tasmanian Tourism is certainly working with cruise ships to at least get as far as Beauty Point. So he's hoping they can pull that off, because certainly in terms of tourism, cruise ships has stolen a huge market, and if we could get them close to Launceston and Northern Tasmania, that'd be a huge fillip for our tourism economy. QVMAG is working in partnership with a range of festivals, all of which assist with boosting their visitor numbers across the year and contribute to the draw card for the state for interstate and overseas visitors. Recent and ongoing partnerships include with the Wooden Boat Festival, which included an exhibition, The Early Dutch Explorers, in the summer of 2016-17. The partnership with Dark Mofo for the Tempest exhibition, which was a fabulous exhibition, which was the overall winner at the Museums and Galleries Australia National Award for 2017. And QVMAG House Museum Narina worked with Dark Mofo on Brigitte Osland's Death Mask. QVMAG and QVMAG also worked together to take a very successful The Art of Science Badan Voyages 1800-1804, sharing some of the freight costs and collaborating on joint exhibition material from our own collections to augment the exhibition. It was an exciting exhibition that came to Tasmania our last summer. In many cases, the work was done in Tasmania and had not returned to Tasmania for over 220 odd years. So it was a pretty special moment for those of us involved with bringing that exhibition here. At QVMAG in 2016-17, our visitation increased by 8% to just over 145,000 visitors. This growth was in part due to the very successful temporary exhibitions Permian Monsters, Life Before the Dinosaurs, even though I was convinced they looked just as bad as any other dinosaur, and the art of science, the Bradman Voyages. On 7 July, QVMAG opened its first permanent gallery dedicated to Tasmanian Aboriginal people, titled The First Tasmanians, Our Story. With a strong education program, the exhibition celebrates the 40,000-year plus of cultural connection and diversity of the Aboriginal people and their adaptation to this very changing environment we now know as Tasmania. With a strong emphasis on northern Tasmania, it is hoped that the exhibition will provide a new focus for cultural tourism, especially with planned links to the interpretation of nearby Cataract Gorge and its cultural significance. And it gets about 350,000 visitors a year. It was one of the reasons why we cited that gallery in our art gallery building, was to have that physical connection to the geography and the land of Cataract Gorge, which is literally a 5-minute walk from the art gallery itself, and encouraging people to get out there in a new dimension and to see the literal cultural landscape that is so absolutely incredible in Cataract Gorge. QVMAG and the City of Launceston have been in negotiation with Mona on the possible relocation of Mona FOMA to Launceston. We're waiting on an announcement by the state government, but the aim of all parties is to bring more high-yield experienced visitors to Tasmania and then get them to stay longer. So it's not purely about numbers, but yield as well. The move to Launceston will facilitate the regional dispersal of tourists across the state, with QVMAG in Veresk as a possible venue. At Port Arthur, in 2016-17, Port Arthur grew 7% with 333,581 day visitors and a further 33,000 people who come at night, which is pretty incredible when there's not a lot to see in a dark place, but they've certainly managed it well. Domestic travellers from Victoria and New South Wales are the largest segment at approximately 30%, with international visitors accounting for approximately 20% of all arrivals. Again, cruise ships arrivals have increased from 9 ships in 2015-16 to 22 ships this year, anchoring in the harbour at Port Arthur. How lucky are they to be able to anchor right on the doorstep again? There were 35,896 cruise ship passengers that were welcomed onto the site, which is an equivalent of a 46% increase from cruise ships the previous year. This year they commenced construction of a newly developed visitor centre, which will have a new restaurant with views over the historic site, outdoor dining, new ticketing and retail spaces, and a fully immersive interpretation gallery featuring an interactive digital map, collection items never before displayed, and 52 new character stories. If any of you have been to Port Arthur, that's a wonderful connection they've started some years ago. With the increase in overnight stays, Port Arthur now offers a range of evening activities and is providing a more broader offering, which includes Point Pure, which was the boys' prison, and the coal mines at the other side of the Tasman Peninsula, which all encourages visitors to stay longer. And I know the federal group are looking long and hard at developing a sapphire-like hotel on the doorstep of Port Arthur. They wouldn't be doing so if they didn't think there was a market for that sort of high-yield stay to that site. And I know many of you will have been to the Tasman Peninsula, but it's not exactly an easy day return from Launceston, so an overnight stay on the Tasman Peninsula is very rewarding, particularly as there's a lot of other things to do. In addition to all that, the very successful Three Capes walk starts and finishes at Port Arthur, providing another cultural link with tourism. Mona, of course the great success story, has increased their visitation by 8%, so we're all doing about the same. Last year they had 368,517 visitors through their doors, let alone all the other people that came to all their other outside events. Of this number, 71% were inbound visitors to Tasmania, so it's now attracting 10% more interstate and international visitors than it did in its first few years. Mona's latest exhibition, the Museum of Everything, has received 56,900 visitors since opening on 10 June, an increase of approximately 20% from the same period last year before I asked them at 3 August. So they're certainly doing well with that new exhibition. Mona FONA, Mona's Summer Festival, which will be coming north, was awarded the 2017 Helpman Award for Best Contemporary Music Festival. It sold over 4,500 tickets to inbound visitors to Tasmania for the 2017 festival itself. It was actually outdone by Dark Mofo 2017. There were more than 427,000 attendances at multiple festival venues for that 10-day festival. This represents a dramatic increase from 297,000 in 2016, with a return of $2.44 million in box office alone. And in saying that, I have not gone to the effort of trying to do the mathematics to calculate what's the broader economic benefit to a community when you have that spend literally in box office, but you can rest assured it is significant. One of the key drivers, as far as I'm concerned, about cultural tourism is that there are many winners in cultural tourism and we can all gain from getting behind it. In 2017, 47% of interstate Dark Mofo visitors spent between 5 and 10 days in Tasmania. Now obviously it's a 10-day festival, but they're not just the fly-in, fly-out that we've heard about before. In fact, 10% stayed for 10 days or more. 77% indicated that Dark Mofo was the primary motivator for their trip. Robbie Bramall, Head of Communications of Mona, notes, "So culture here is the Trojan horse." While all this is happening broadly across Hobart and beyond, Mona continues to develop its site. The new Pharos wing of the museum is scheduled to open in late December, and the momentum continues to grow with the development of a new hotel, which they hope may include a poker machine-less casino. It's somewhat irony that Mona is built solely on the takings of gambling, and there's plan to do more with the casino, but it certainly makes for a very different cultural site. In 2012, Hobart was rated 7 in the top 10 cities of the world by the travel book company Lonely Planet. When I read that, it was clear to me that Lonely Planet hadn't been to Launceston. A major determining factor for the rating was undoubtedly Mona, which has amply demonstrated that arts and culture can be a boon rather than a burden to our economy. To top a phenomenal rise in Mona, Mona was listed in 2015 as the 10th most significant international museum and tourist destination in the world. That is a pretty big rap for a place that is just sitting on our doorstep. I believe since then, arts and culture in its most broad sense can and is shifting tourism's dependency on wilderness and is creating a more sustainable tourism industry for Tasmania. Tourism numbers have never been higher, with both Hobart and Launceston airports recording big increases in inbound passengers. While Tourism Tasmania notes across the sector a marked improvement in activity and spending. They are coming for a variety of reasons, but without doubt, culture has a lot to do with it. Having said this, we need to be mindful that our visitors are not just tourists. The people who live and work around us are probably more important. Every time I stand at the queue to enter Mona, I'm always delighted to see the high number of Tasmanian people visiting. I haven't done a survey, I expect they have, but I suspect many of them would probably never have been in a contemporary art museum before. How wonderful to be reaching such a broad demographic. We do need to remember that the arts and culture provide the important sense of place, identity and well-being for the many people who choose to live here. We now have an opportunity to build on the heightened interest in Tasmania. Over the last few years, we've seen an investment in our cultural capital through major renovations at our premier museums, including QVMAG, QVMAG, Port Arthur Historic Sites and Mona. They each have increased their offering and are as good, if not better, than many institutions on the mainland. With a strong marketing effort, the North could offer another point of entry into the state. It does not have to be one or the other, rather increasing our offer. Let us not forget that many tourists who arrive here on the Spirit of Tasmania fully expect to trawl their way around the state. And the distance is not that great by mainland standards. We should harness this more effectively. There is now an expectation that Tasmania has a strong and vibrant arts sector, but until recently we have not seen the collaboration that really backs this up. There is very much an element of self-help here. I know QVMAG, we should be doing more to better embrace the other cultural institutions that are here in our own city, such as the Tasmanian Design Centre, Princess Theatre, Sawtooth Gallery, the National Trust properties, Tasdance, the schools galleries, and importantly the commercial galleries, which are vital to our contemporary arts industry. And what about our city sculptures, the stories behind our heritage buildings, and the landscapes of social meaning? That all is just here in Launceston. We have an excellent regional museums and galleries in Devonport and in Burnie that equally can be a focus for the arts tourists to do more in their region. A standout for me in regional arts recently has been Lark, which closed its doors in Queenstown last year. Shore artist Raymond Arnold always said that this was going to be a 10-year project, and when 10 years was up, he closed the door. But I'd secretly hoped he would keep it going. It was a brilliant example of what can be done in regional Tasmania. At first sight, you would not expect Queenstown to be such a cultural hotspot. But they demonstrated an arts cohesion through Lark, its residencies and their very successful Heritage and Art Festival now known as Unconformity. Having recognised the absence of cultural tourism within the Stafford Report of 2012 that I mentioned earlier, the City of Launceston has commissioned the respected arts consultant Robin Archer to provide a cultural strategy for the region. She notes, a cultural strategy seeks to enrich the cultural landscapes first for the inhabitants of the city and the region, but in doing so create an attractive destination for visitors, a place where tourists would want to come not just for the food and the football, but to enjoy a wider and deeper cultural experience, including architecture, the physical beauty of the valley setting, the Cataract Gorge and the river, as well as the place's history through the geography, visual arts, storytelling and architecture, alongside a celebration of the plastic and performing arts practice and creative industry of the artists and the craftspeople who live and work here now. A salient message and a great start. Despite the concern over recent changes with the Australia Council, the economic health of Tasmania and the ever-present issue over funding, the arts in Tasmania, if nothing else, is resilient and well done. I would urge colleagues in the arts and entertainment and events business to work more closely with the tourism industry and to work more closely together. It is not a competition. If done well, there is room for us all. In many ways, we are complementary, and many of our visitors are looking for that quality extended experience. That is what we're looking to do with the help of Robin Archer. We can sell Northern Tasmania more broadly with our unique museums and heritage, our craft and design, our performing arts and our special events, and it can all be washed down with our excellent Tasmanian food and wine. Why would you go anywhere else? Although I can say I was in Noosa last week and it didn't look too bad compared to what it's like in Tassie at the moment. And I would suggest that museums are moving on with this with a greater level of cooperation that I haven't really seen for some time. One example is being championed by TMAG in conjunction with Link Tasmania to look at sharing Tasmania's cultural collections through digitisation and making them as accessible as a tourism driver. They have invited other collecting institutions to be involved in the project, including QVMAG. As noted in the submission for funding through to the Department of State Growth, it says in this application, there is a potential to significantly grow Tasmania's offer in cultural tourism by encouraging visitors to access our rich and diverse cultural heritage held in all of Tasmania's large and small collections. There are over 140 museums and collections dispersed across all regions around the state. At a time when many tourists plan their personalised trip online in advance, the lack of visibility of our historical cultural heritage is a major constraint in building demand for cultural tourists to visit the many locations across Tasmania. The first phase of Tasmanian collection developed by QVMAG and Link demonstrated that a dynamic online platform could close the gap. The next phase was scale up and roll out the platform to more participating organisations and complete the platform design to link it to branding and functionality of the Discover Tasmania ecosystem. The Tasmanian collection will continue to be created by Tasmanian cultural and heritage organisations in collaborating partnership with Tourism Tasmania. That is a big shift in this state to see that sort of work happening behind the scenes. At a meeting of GLAM Peak, which is Galleries, Libraries, Archives and Museums in Hobart in July, which discussed a national framework for digital access to Australia's collections, it was agreed that Tasmania would be the first pilot study funded by the federal government because we are shovel ready. In addition to QVMAG and Link Tasmania, QVMAG, State Archives, Mona and UTAS, which has a large distributed collection, will be involved. While this is about broad museum collecting direction, it is directly linked to cultural tourism and giving a single access point for exploring the cultural resources of Tasmania. As well as being able to delve in and at any time and any place for many reasons, it is also expected that what is uncovered will act as a destination incentive plan when visiting the state. Museums are providing a catalyst for a remarkable growth in cultural tourism. We need to build on this in the arts and culture sector more broadly. It is not one or the other. Visitors, whether they are local, intrastate, interstate or international, are here for all-round experience, and we have a product that is different and in demand. We should give it to them, and we should work more effectively with the tourism industry to make it happen. I know closer to home we are working with UTAS on a number of fronts. We've collaborated with Tourism Research and Education Network, known as TREND, UTAS, on a comprehensive visitor survey in 2016 on motivations for consuming art and cultural experiences, led by Dr. Kim Lehman, which will help us redirect our marketing focus. We also have an exciting opportunity with the relocation of UTAS Newnham to the inner city, especially with the Inverest precinct. And of course, the Launceston Cultural Strategy, produced by Robin Archer, involving many of us in the industry, will provide a well thought out blueprint for what next. A few years ago, the West Australian Premier, now a distant memory thankfully, labelled Tasmania as nothing more than a national park. I would argue that it is much more than this. At a time when people are looking beyond wilderness, Tasmania, with its cultural history, its vibrant arts sector, including events and recreational options, we are well placed to again be a leading driver for cultural tourism in Australia. If we can all do this, we will all benefit. Thank you.